Welcome everybody to this latest FIDIC webinar in our 2023 series of events. My name's Tony Barry. I'm the president of FIDIC, and I'm delighted to say that today's event is being supported, as are all our FIDIC webinars in this new series, by infrastructure engineering software company Bentley Systems, FIDIC's 2023 webinar strategic partner. We're very pleased and grateful to have Bentley on board and look forward to working with them throughout the year. And for those of you who may not be aware, this year is a very significant one for FIDIC. It's our 110th anniversary of our formation back in 1913. We will be celebrating that milestone throughout the year, and especially at our Global Infrastructure Conference in Singapore in September. So keep your eyes open for what we have planned, and please do celebrate 110 years of FIDIC with us. Today's webinar is on the subjects very close to our hearts here at FIDIC, and that is making the most out of FIDIC and how you can get the best out of the industry's global representative body. I'm delighted that today's event's been organised jointly by the FIDIC Membership Committee and the FIDIC Directors and Secretaries Advisory Council. These two important bodies play a key role in helping to frame and guide FIDIC's membership services and assisting with raising the profile of what we do and how we get people involved. What we want to do today is to demonstrate the benefits of engaging and getting involved with FIDIC, while recognising that in a busy industry and a commercial landscape, with limitations on everybody's time and resources and increasing business pressure, it can sometimes be a challenge to find the opportunities to engage with organisations like FIDIC and to get the most out of them. We hope that by listening to our international panel of speakers who are already engaged with FIDIC, we can increase your understanding of what we do and hopefully encourage you to get more involved with FIDIC and your local member associations in your own country. In fact, involvement in your local member association can provide you with opportunity to leverage many of the best practice benefits and other services FIDIC offers. I hope that after listening to our speakers that you'll gain a better understanding of what FIDIC and its member associations can offer you and how best you can work with us to ensure that FIDIC continues to provide the most relevant services to its key stakeholders. So today's webinar is an important one. We have some knowledgeable and insightful speakers to share their experiences with you. They'll be introduced to you shortly by our webinar moderator, Chris Campbell, CEO of Consulting Engineers South Africa, otherwise known as CESA, who's also the chair of FIDIC Directors and Secretaries Advisory Council. Before hearing from Chris, however, it's my great pleasure to introduce Louis Villaroya, FIDIC Vice President, Board Member and President of ETISA, to give a short welcome from the FIDIC Board. Louis, over to you.
Thank you very much, Tony. On behalf of the FIDIC Board, I would like to welcome everyone to today's webinar. I would like to endorse what you just said about the importance of today's webinar in demonstrating how people can get the most out of FIDIC and their local member associations, and how, by working together, we can achieve better representation for our industry. The FIDIC Membership Committee and our Directors and Secretaries Advisory Council play a key role in our organization. They advise the board on membership matters and help us to ensure that we are delivering services that our members, our member firms, and the wider industry want us to provide. As Tony just said, we recognize that in an increasingly busy industry and commercial landscape, with limitations on everyone's time and resources, it can be a challenge to find the time to get involved with an industry organization like FIDIC. But all the efforts of FIDIC will not be enough if they are not reciprocated by the MAs. To get the maximum possible benefit from FIDIC, MAs have to dedicate time and effort to learn what FIDIC can offer and how to interact with other MAs or with other secretariats. Through this context, and with the help and coordination of FIDIC, our MAs with more needs who learn from others with better capacities on topics such as accounting and internal control procedures, governance, methods to attract new associates, and how to retain the existing ones, additional methods to get incomes from events like training, sponsoring, etc. I'm convinced that all the efforts that MAs put into understanding and using the capabilities that FIDIC can offer will be greatly rewarded. We hope to show you today the value and benefits of engaging with FIDIC and your local member association through the examples and experiences of those who have benefit from that engagement and involvement. In this FIDIC's 100th year, it is worth reflecting on the role of our volunteers, who do so much on behalf of our industry to ensure that their collective representative body, FIDIC, and member associations are providing the most relevant services. I know that our speakers today will highlight some of the big picture benefits that the industry, that companies and their staff can get from their involvement in FIDIC. And like Tony said, I also hope that having listened to what our speakers have to say, you will want to get engaged and involved in FIDIC and your member association if you are not already. So please enjoy today's webinar and ask as many questions as you wish to our expert panel, who I am sure will be able to show you how you can make the most of FIDIC and what we offer. And now give me the great pleasure to introduce the moderator of today's event, Chris Campbell. Chris is the CEO of Consulting Engineers South Africa and also chair of the FIDIC's Directors and Secretaries Advisory Council. And he will now introduce the speakers and take you through today's webinar. Without any further ado, please, Chris, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tony, and good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across this wonderful world of ours. And it's indeed my pleasure to be your moderator for today's session. I am joined by the co-moderator, Eni Sowetanto, who is the chair of the FIDIC Membership Committee. And she will ably play the role of the co-moderator. Eni, by the way, is from the Indonesian Member Association. And our panel of speakers and our program for today, we've lined up a host of really eminent speakers from cross-cutting aspects of the FIDIC ecosystem, which we are hoping to create a better understanding of, from the volunteer into the local member association, from the member association and the volunteers into FIDIC itself. And hopefully with any questions that you may have, we can help clarify and indeed be able to ensure that we can both ensure the sustainability of our local member associations and FIDIC in today's really busy world of work. So without further ado, our four speakers we have lined up for today. We have Helen Davidson, the CEO of the Association of Consulting Engineers in New Zealand. And then our second speaker, Dr. Michele Kruger. By the way, Helen is the Deputy Chair of the Directors and Secretaries Advisory Council. The second speaker will be Dr. Michele Kruger. She's from South Africa and currently is the function general manager for water infrastructure at a leading consulting firm, SMEC. And Michele also is the chair of the Diversity, Equity and Inclusivity Advisory Council. Our third speaker is Siobhan Robinson. She's the sector leader, water supply and treatment from Kerr Wood Lydell Associates, in Canada, and hers would be the perspective from a future leader and the challenges one has in a very busy working environment and being part of the FIDIC Future Leaders. And our last speaker, but definitely not in any order of importance, Prashant Kapila, Managing Director of Intercontinental Consultants and Technocrats. He's from the association in India. And in between all of this, after our first speaker, we'll have a very quick poll. It's a snap poll, so please be quick on the button to respond. And following the last speaker, we will also then have another poll, followed by a Q&A, and we will then wrap as best as possible at 1:30. So depending on where you are, this is 1:30 Central European time. So without further ado, I'm going to call on our first speaker, Helen. If you may join us and proceed with your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, and hello everyone on what is a late evening here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. So it's after 10 p.m. in the evening. So bear with me if I'm looking a little bit tired. It's been a very long day. As Chris has said, I'm Helen. I'm the Chief Executive at the Association of Consulting and Engineering in New Zealand. What you also need to know about me is that I myself am a serial volunteer. So my volunteer roles include, as Chris has already mentioned, the Deputy Chair role of the FIDIC DNS Advisory Council. I chair the Engineering New Zealand Foundation. I chair my local school board, and I'm also a member of New Zealand's Health Research Council Ethics Committee. So I'm going to talk to you about the importance of volunteering from a member association perspective from my role at ACE. But what I can also bring to this conversation is not just why people like me need to rely on volunteers, but also the perspective of a volunteer. So someone who, like many of you, are really maxed out, but really willing and committed to give back to causes that you really believe in. And what I say about my member association equally applies to volunteering on the global stage for FIDIC, obviously. So what are member associations? So member associations are organised volunteer associations. We evolve out of groups of passionate individuals coming together and the shared enthusiasm and commitment of those people who recognise the power of community in pursuing a common cause. So whether it's in engineering or in healthcare or in education, or other areas, associations are usually initiated by a small group of dedicated individuals who feel a deep calling to make a difference, to bring about positive change, or to address a specific challenge or need within their industry and community. To put simply, associations are grounded in the principle of volunteerism and emerge from the simple yet really powerful idea that by working together, we can achieve more than we can as individuals. So voluntary input is key to the success of our associations, of your associations. It's through the dedication of volunteers that member associations can flourish, can evolve, and can extend their impact far beyond what could be achieved by any one individual or any one organisation. That's not just because we can do more with an army of volunteers, but it's also because volunteers bring a really diverse range of skills, knowledge, and perspectives, which enrich our association's collective wisdom and impact. As a member association, we cannot be relevant to our members without our members. And the expertise our member volunteers bring to the table enable us to be in all sorts of conversations. For example, ACE New Zealand's current volunteers include, and this is just a snapshot, I won't capture everybody, but the chair of our legal forum, making sure we stay on top of and respond to industry trends in the legal and commercial environment. We have 3 transport groups that are chaired by different volunteers, who connect our consultants working in transport and build influential and trusting relationships with key client organisations. We have representatives in key policy processes. For example, a national review of our standard government D&C contract, which is a national standard, which is currently underway. Hugely important to our members, and we have someone at the table in that review. The Code of Practice for Water that will underpin the work of a huge water reform that's going on in New Zealand at the moment. We have representatives on an industry steering group supporting the industry to transition to a new way of doing temporary traffic management in New Zealand, and much more. We rely on volunteers to be our awards judges, and without them, we wouldn't have a strong peer-to-peer bar for recognising and rewarding excellence in consulting. And that's not just about recognising the amazing work that our members do, and of course that's really important, but it's also about putting the work our members do on a big stage and inspiring the next generation of people as well. It's about all the other people who share their time and knowledge with us and other members through events, through education, through writing blogs on topical issues, assisting with practice notes and advisories, and more. And of course, our board and our regional chairs who oversee and promote and champion our strategy into each of their communities. So at ACE New Zealand, we've increased our membership and influence significantly over the past 3 years, and our volunteers have been at the heart of that transformation. If we have credible and dedicated volunteers, we get invited to do more on behalf of our members, and our members can be more influential. So it's a critical ecosystem, as you can see. So I hope it's really clear how important our volunteers are, and that those on the call from the sector might now be feeling inspired to give some time back to transform the professions and the sectors that they care so much for. And I know some of our latest speakers are going to speak a bit more directly to our employers about why you need to let your staff have these non-billable hours to enable their volunteering. But what do associations need in a volunteer? To put it bluntly, if you're going to volunteer, you have to be willing to volunteer. So we're not the easy route to governance experience or exposure. The hardest thing for associations are silent contributors. We need active contributors, and if you do that, you will reap the rewards that I know other members of this panel are going to talk about soon, and you will contribute to a stronger sector. But also to the associations in the room, I want to give you some tips to get the most out of your volunteers. As I said at the beginning, I'm a little bit of a serial volunteer myself. I'll put my all in, but I expect something back. So it's not complicated. And it's all about being clear with your volunteers about the skills you need so you can put your volunteers to work in the right places. So that's the technical skills, but it's also the other, what we call central or soft skills. So for example, our representative on the review of the D&C contract I talked about, they need to know all about that, but they also need to be excellent communicators and influencers who can engage back with the wider membership around what's happening and when. As an association, for your volunteers, you need to be really clear about the time commitment. You need to be discerning. So your volunteers are representatives of your organisation and your overall brand. So they need to be credible and they need to be your brand champions. If they don't buy into what you're doing, they're probably not a good fit for the role. Really critically and really importantly for me, you need to think about diversity in your volunteers. So the beauty of volunteers is that they bring diversity of thought to the table. So seek out volunteers from a range of firm sizes and locations. Sometimes you need to go and specifically tap people on the shoulders other than just doing an open call. Consider diversity of professional background and gender and other diversity. Consider things like a panel pledge where you won't participate in a panel, or you'll always put people up for a panel only if it's diverse. And think about how you can promote up and coming leaders, give exposure to people who otherwise might not have it. For the roles that require big commitment, make sure your volunteers are getting something out of it. So think about profile and exposure. For example, a write-up in your annual report, a blog or a LinkedIn profile, and publicly thank them. Making volunteering cool and enviable is really important, and support them with their wider growth. And lastly, your volunteers are really busy. So be considerate of their time and their priorities and their well-being. This means check in with them. Do they have what they need? Do they feel valued and important? Tell them how important their work is to the bigger picture of the organisation. Be responsive to them. Let their hard work be recognised. Let them know you hear them and see them. Celebrate wins. Show your appreciation. A person who feels appreciated will always do more than what's expected. So show your appreciation early and show it often. In that way, everyone will thrive through the volunteering journey. Connect them with other volunteers and leaders in your sector to help them extend their professional network. If your volunteers are connected to others in your association, they're more likely to stay involved with your association, and you'll get years of great volunteering out of them. Flexibility. So the key to getting volunteers these days is also flexibility. Allow them to leave a little early or finish up projects at home. The more you're willing to work with volunteers who are doing all this stuff on top of their day job, the more they'll be willing to work with you and your association. So that's it from me. That's a little bit of a membership association perspective on how critical volunteers are to the work we do, how much stronger we are as your voice, your association, if you can commit time to volunteer for us. And also a little bit of advice for the member associations on the call around just how to make it a really special and rewarding experience for your volunteers as well. So before I pass back to Chris, I'm just going to say a massive thank you to all our volunteers. We couldn't do it without you. So thank you, and over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Helen, for that insights from an MA perspective. Colleagues, being mindful of the time, I am going to focus on the poll that we have. And the question we have for the poll is, what is your level of knowledge and involvement in your local member association? You may choose one of the three options. Please, it is a lightning poll, so if you like to respond, and we can very quickly give you the results of what that looks like. So almost immediately, for me, this is actually it highlights the necessity and the value of us having such a webinar where we can indeed share with a broader audience the FIDIC ecosystem, starting with the member associations, starting with the companies who are part of those member associations, and then the member associations being the member of FIDIC. And our results show that at 19% have a high understanding of their local association. 28% medium, they are aware generally, 28%, but and we've got a bit of work to do. Member associations is at 53%, there is a very low knowledge of the local member associations. So I guess there's some work to be done so that more of the individuals in member companies know more about their local member associations, and subsequently then how we all fit into the broader global FIDIC family. So without further ado, we will close this poll now, and it gives us a good segue into the words of wisdom and experience that are going to be shared with us by Dr. Michele Kruger. So please, Michele, go ahead.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris. So I've been a volunteer for both my member association and for FIDIC since 2007, and I want to share my journey with you. So as a young professional chairing the YPF of CISA, it was an incredibly safe space for a young person to learn everything about chairing a committee, leadership, and getting it wrong. And also being part of the FIDIC or chairing the FIDIC YPF at the time, I also was in a safe space to make mistakes when you're quite young, leading a group. I actually caused the international incident with Japan, just by the way, but luckily it was in a safe area and I had great people leading me. Luckily it was a very minor issue, but can you imagine learning in such a safe space so that you're able to do what you need to do when you're older, right? So I was lucky enough to move on through my member association to be on the board of CISA, and that experience was incredible. Now, through FIDIC, I'm honored to say that I'm a chair of the FIDIC Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Advisory Council, where I'm honored enough to be advising the board and sitting in on the FIDIC board meetings. So when people say, why should you be volunteering? Look at the amazing journey that I've been allowed to have. And if you're not sitting at the table, you can't really complain and say, well, what's my member association doing for me? What's FIDIC doing for me? What are you doing to be part of these committees and having your voice heard? Because remember, both your member association and FIDIC is the voice of consulting engineering. So if you're not wanting to participate, sitting at the table and making your voice heard, how can you complain about what the people are doing if you're not willing to volunteer? And volunteer is a passion. As you've heard from Helen, if you're passionate about something, be it sustainability, be it diversity, for example, then get in there, be part of those committees and make a difference. The committees need you. And when it comes to the volunteer that time that you're giving, it means so much. These member associations and FIDIC need all the time that you're willing to give. So think of the impact that you can make. So for example, I'm so honored to say that for the first time in the history of FIDIC, we have a president-elect who's a female. So don't ever say that you cannot make a difference. Any person can make a difference on a voluntary committee. So I encourage you, please encourage your young people to join from YPF age, your senior staff on all committees. You will make a difference. Thanks, Chris. That's me, short and sweet.
Michelle, that was extremely short and sweet, considering that you had such a long journey, or up to now. I'm sure that there are many more pearls of wisdom that you could otherwise share with our audience. And we will take comments and questions later. And I think so that we can ensure that we have a more interactive session, I'm going to move on to our third speaker, that being Siobhan Robinson. If you would don't mind joining me, and please go ahead and share your pearls of wisdom and your journey with our audience. Thank you.
All right. Wonderful. Thanks, Chris. So yes, my name is Siobhan Robinson, and I'm joining today from Vancouver, Canada. And before I dive in, I'll just speak to June is actually National Indigenous History Month in Canada. So I will express my gratitude for working, playing, and living in the traditional unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. Now, it's such a pleasure to be here today and to follow two other serial volunteers. Myself have done about a decade of volunteering with my local member association, which is ACEC, the Association of Consulting Engineering Companies, both at the provincial level, so within British Columbia, and nationally, ACEC Canada. And I'm here today to share a little bit of my history, what I've learned through my volunteer journey, and hopefully share those pearls of wisdom, as Chris mentioned, around what benefit a future leader may gain from this volunteerism, as well as the benefits that may be gained by their employer who are providing that support to engage. So my background, I mentioned I've done a decade of volunteering. I originally jumped into MA involvement when I moved across Canada. It's quite a large country. And so I moved from kind of the east side to the west side, and I found myself kind of lacking a community of people. And I thought, how am I going to make myself a new community? And I found ACC, and I started volunteering. I organized breakfast seminars, and I just loved it. There was such a great sense of community, this sense of being able to make a difference. And so I worked my way up through various volunteer leadership roles within both the local provincial MA and then up to the national MA, and ultimately culminated my experience with leading the Future Leaders Group nationally and acting as a director both for the provincial and national associations for a total of 3 years. And I had the distinct pleasure of going and being a member of the FIDIC Future Leaders Management Training Program in 2022, which culminated at the National Conference in Geneva last year. So my journey has been one of discovery and one of connection. And I think this speaks to some of these key benefits for volunteers. So you have the opportunity when you sort of throw in with an MA, as Helen said, to make a difference and to make an impact. But when you're doing that, what I find most amazing is you're doing that with like-minded individuals, and the connections that you build are so strong and lasting. Some of the strongest friends that I have, I met through volunteering with ACCBC and ACC Canada. These are people that I can, without any pause, pick up the phone, give them a call if I'm having any issues, personal or professional. And that strength of community gives me such a feeling of security and safety within my career. As Michelle mentioned, there is also sort of the safety of the space. So when you're developing leadership skills, a lot of times within companies as a future leader, there are big steps between, being someone who executes the work and someone who is now leading a team or leading a business unit. And it can be a little bit intimidating, and these are skills that need to be practiced. So what I found to be incredibly valuable is that I had the opportunity to take on leadership in these sort of incremental steps and get really honest feedback all the way through. Because the beauty of volunteering with other volunteers or leading other volunteers is they're going to tell you if they don't like what you're doing. And they may do this by giving you a call, or they may do this by just by sort of disengaging, stop showing up to your meetings, stop doing what they say they're going to do. And so it gives you this testing ground to say, test out different ways of leading, different ways of engaging with people, and to do it in this safe space where you can actually, not end up with any career limiting moves, as you might sometimes refer to them. So I found that to be incredibly helpful, and something that whenever I'm speaking to other future leaders, I mention that and say, if you have any leadership aspirations, find a way to volunteer in a leadership position and use that as a way to build your toolkit. You also gain an understanding of how the industry works, especially if you're moving up through volunteer leadership positions and have the opportunity to sit on an MA board. Because once you're at that board table, especially as a future leader or young professional, so typically this would be under 40, you get to see what the movers and shakers in the industry are talking about. What are the things that are keeping them up at night? And that gives you a sense not only of what the industry is all about, but what it takes to successfully run a business. So this is hugely important if you want to move into that leadership role or into a management position within your own firm. Now, taking a bit of a different perspective, what are the values, or what's the benefit that the volunteer companies or the people, the companies that support these individuals, what are the values or the benefits that they reap? So first off, when you are supporting your staff to volunteer, providing some non-billable hours, you're giving staff the ability to drive their own career, to develop a strong community, as well as to understand the value of their work. I mean, Helen spoke to the importance of doing project awards and celebrating the good work that we do. And I think in this time where people are moving around between companies or sometimes leaving engineering or leaving consulting more broadly, having a clear understanding of the value and impact of our work is really important. active volunteers also tend to stay really motivated, and they bring a lot of the energy as well as that broader perspective that they've gained through their volunteerism back to your organization. You can think of them as these little micro doses of energy and enthusiasm, and it's a great way to keep to not only keep them engaged, but to keep others in their cohort engaged. And I'll wrap up with sort of speaking to the value of the MA, because once you've been involved with an MA, you understand the value that it brings. And so you're actually going to bring that back to your organization as well and help you make the most of your investment. Well, Chris, I'll pass it back to you now.
Siobhan, thank you. Thank you for that contribution. And I think that, you know, the pearls of wisdom that Siobhan and I guess we can reflect on at the very early stages in her career are able to share with you. Indeed, in the introduction and listening to some of the speakers, I'm delighted to hear how they are serial volunteers. And I myself have been a serial volunteer, and I think that, you know, for many of us, that journey could even start during your secondary schooling education process, or even at universities. Some of you are members of student chapters, and you know, it starts there. So, you know, this is just a continuum around the willingness of persons to unselfishly contribute, give back to the sustainability of profession and an industry, without which contribution it would all count for naught. And before I go to the next speaker, there is an adequate and a very apt Latin expression that says ex nihilo nihil fit. In English, translated roughly, it means nothing comes from doing nothing. And I guess that's important for us to consider as we try to make a difference in this big wide world of ours and our profession. So without further ado, I'm going to move on to our fourth speaker, Prashant Kapila. Please, if you don't mind joining me on the podium. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. A very good morning, a good afternoon, and a good evening to all of you. And thank you for joining in to this webinar today on how to make the most of FIDIC. I'd like to take a step back and reflect briefly about and share my journey of FIDIC with you, which will hopefully then provide the perspective to you upon which my remarks are based. FIDIC for me is the voice of the global consulting engineering industry. It is an association having consulting engineering associations from over 100 countries as its members. Collectively, it represents nearly 40,000 consulting engineering firms. How does FIDIC work? Well, it has a board, it has a secretariat, and a number of committees and select councils who work collectively to push the issues and address the challenges that our industry faces and we as consulting engineers face. Barring the secretariat, all the other people who work for FIDIC on its board and the various committees and councils are volunteers. These are volunteers from the consulting industry who are working in various consulting firms, industry practitioners, who volunteer their time and expertise to further the cause of the profession besides their regular paying jobs or businesses. It is these volunteers, my dear friends, that keep FIDIC relevant with respect to industry concerns, providing solutions to issues of global impact like climate change, and help provide solutions to build a sustainable and green infrastructure. I think for me, the volunteers are the real fuel in the FIDIC engine. And as engineers, we all know the importance of quality fuel to make an engine work smoothly and efficiently. It is ironic that it was exactly in 2007 in Singapore where Michele and I both started our journey together as FIDIC volunteers. It was also the year when I started my volunteering at the local member association in India. And little did I know back then that how much I would benefit both professionally and personally from my 16 years of active engagement as a volunteer. Since then, I've served as a member of the erstwhile Young Professionals Steering Committee. I've hosted the FIDIC Global Conference and the FIDIC Asia Pacific Conference in New Delhi, and served on various committees and councils, and been a speaker at annual conferences a few times, and currently serve as the head of the consulting business faculty at the FIDIC Academy and a member of the DNS Advisory Council. I can say without an iota of doubt that the time spent by me volunteering and being connected with FIDIC and meeting all the wonderful and numerous people over the years has significantly influenced me both professionally and personally. We live in a world with no boundaries, thanks to the internet and the digital age and now AI. However, there are many things that you can only learn through an in-person experience, personal interactions, and networking opportunities, which FIDIC provides. As a volunteer at different stages of my career, I've experienced many cultures, learned varying perspectives on the same issue, learned how something which is very difficult in one part of the world can be part of the routine in another. The networking opportunities are immense, and being involved in FIDIC has certainly helped my firm's business grow. Besides, over the years, I've made countless friends and associations that stand me in good stead today. Yes, as the managing director of a global consulting firm, there are challenges of sending volunteers at both the ROCA, MA, and FIDIC level. We are all experiencing globally and in India a huge deficit of quality workforce. There just aren't enough engineers to do all the work that we've undertaken. There's also an issue of billable man hours and volunteer hours that one has to balance. Firms must choose professionals who are dedicated towards the profession with longevity in the firm, who are ready to attend conferences, and firms must invest in sending these young professionals and staff to conferences repeatedly, not just for 1 or 2 years when they're young professionals. Then the individuals too have to be committed to work at odd hours, write industry thought papers, attend committee meetings and webinars such as this at odd hour, which Siobhan and Helen are doing at 5 in the morning and 10 at night. So I would like to say that volunteering is totally worth it, and one of the best investments firms can make by nominating and supporting professionals to volunteer at their member association and FIDIC level. The FIDIC family is truly global, and volunteering at the member association and FIDIC level not only enriches the person, it also enriches the MA, FIDIC, and in turn, our industry. Thank you.
Prashant, thank you very much for your insights into the issues around the value of volunteering. I think, one of the major takeaways there, and you've highlighted it yourself, is, and having been a practitioner myself in a consulting engineering company, because I think that's the root source of our volunteers, the individuals in member companies. I do recall a lesson in life shared with me by a really seasoned practitioner, and the one regret in life he had in respect of his business and his ability to grow his business was the limited networking that he had been a part of. And indeed, I think, through your member association and through FIDIC, you have a global network that you may have access to, which can really unlock huge amounts of opportunities. But if we don't get to know each other, get to know of each other, we may forego that. So, therein lies the opportunity even for companies who don't look at a long strategic view on why I would allow my staff to volunteer some of their time and not manage all of their time only on billable hours. The returns may not be immediate, but certainly I think, into the future, companies will benefit through that investment in allowing that level of flexibility. And of course, we fully appreciate the need for control. We are, after all, as consulting engineering companies, also managing a business which needs to remain a going concern. So without further ado, we've come to the end of the presentations from our speakers directly. And I'm now going to go over to our Q&A and have a look at some of the questions that have been posed. And I think there was one, the first question that I picked up, colleagues, was, and I'm going to direct this to any one of our panel members. It's a really open-ended question, not specifically related to the ecosystem, and I have my own ideas. In fact, it's not a vexing question, but I will allow any one of you as practitioners to respond. And the question is, what are the major contractual obligations for works which are executed on verbal confirmation? Prashant, in managing your business, how would you deal with such a situation where purely based on the verbal confirmation, how much would you do purely based on that? And what recourse would you imagine you have if the particular potential client reneges on that verbal?
Well, thanks, Chris, for the question. Well, I think, times have changed. And when I started working as a consulting engineer, I would say about 2 decades ago, verbal confirmations had a value, and people's word had a value. And you would undertake work if the client had asked you to do some work, and you would go ahead and start working, and the contract would follow. But more and more, as time has gone on, I've noticed that, and we face this as a company, that there's more chances of the client sometimes going renegade on a verbal order. So we proceed with a lot of caution now, and we in fact do not proceed with working on a verbal order until we have a written confirmation. And that is the general rule that we follow across all geographies in our business. Unless it's a change order to an existing client on an existing contract. And then also we only do about 10% of the work, and as we wait for the final confirmation. But if it's a brand new work without a verbal on a verbal confirmation, we will not execute it.
Thank you. Is there any differing view that you might want to offer?
Yeah.
Maybe. Sorry.
Please do go ahead, Annie.
Thank you, Chris. We have listened from the volunteers, from the speakers. First, from Helen, that we need to have a patient as a volunteer. And also from Shoban, it is very important that with a volunteer, we can go forward to step and improve our leadership. This is the same as my experience involved in the member association, local and member association, and also the FIDIC. So from that explanation, I would like to ask to Tony or Louis, because this is very important. Given that member companies are facing financial challenges, what concessions are considered by MAs and FIDIC alike to offset, in part, the revenue earning opportunity that is lost when the employees serve as volunteers? This is that one important question from most of the companies, I think. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's a question from companies to one of our panel members, and going to pick on Michelle.
I saw Tony wanted to jump in there. I do have a time limit, so Tony, I'm quickly going to jump in front of you and log off. So one of the things that we just have to remember is every volunteer and every minute or hour spent for FIDIC or for a member association comes with a title and commitment. And that is, to my mind, a marketing opportunity for any company. You can be proud of these people who have shown leadership not only in the company or the field, but also in the industry or the country or even in the world. So I would say to any company, market the fact that you have a person who's volunteering in any of the member associations or within FIDIC, because this tells your clients that you prescribe to the pillars of FIDIC, which is not FIDIC contracts. That's the most important thing people always miscommunicate. FIDIC is not FIDIC contracts. FIDIC represents quality, integrity, sustainability. Any person who then represents FIDIC in your company then speaks to those pillars. So market it. This is marketing material. Over to you, Anthony.
Tony, do you want to offer?
Yeah, so to pick up Helen's word, I'm a serial volunteer, and I first volunteered for Consult Australia, was then ACEA in 1988, and have been doing so ever since. So I guess that means I see value in it. I recognise I've been in firms where we've had recessions, we've cut back on staff numbers, we've worked been paid for 9-day fortnights, having to work effectively 11 days. I've gone through all of those difficulties, 17%, 18% interest rates. Some of you probably haven't ever heard of those sort of numbers, but they were frightening times, but we continued with our volunteer work. And there's a number of reasons that I personally do it. The first one is that Prashant has already mentioned, is the phenomenal connection you get with other people around the world or around your country. The second thing for me is actually I'm probably not the smartest card in the pack, and a lot of my good ideas have come because I've heard from what other people have said. Other people have expressed a problem or mentioned some issue that they can't solve or struggling with. So I've got many good ideas from other people and continue to do so today. I find other people absolutely inspiring. The third thing is I get from other people is a lot of energy. I am absolutely inspired by the people I meet in this FIDIC world and in Consult Australia. And, you know, I've found great opportunities to collaborate with lots of people, bounce ideas off them, been inspired to do research and work with them to find solutions to their problems. And in many cases, I've worked with them to negotiate changes in industry practice and all sorts of other things. So there's a great deal in my mind as I was able to take all those ideas on board that I was getting from colleagues and pass that back into my firm. I wrote a tribute to Jorge Diaz-Padilla, who passed away late last year, for an event in Mexico, and I drew out that actually my conversations with Jorge helped the company I work for, Oricon, to develop its integrity management system. And I spent a lot of time with Jorge just in conversation. We did exchange quite a number of emails after that, but that was the conversations that took me in a good direction there. That goes back to 2008. And those conversations, I think you'll find fantastically important to a person growing up, or growing up in the industry. The last thing I'd say is that we just had this recently at our Global Leadership Forum. The opportunity in FIDIC is for every person in the industry to engage with its leaders. So whether they're CEOs of the very large firms or CEOs of small firms, at a FIDIC conference, you'll find you can walk up and talk to any of them, and they'll very happily talk to you. And it's often referred to as the FIDIC family. And I think, again, Prashant made the point, whenever you need help, you can reach out and get it. It is available, even if it's just a conversation. It often gives you a steer in the right direction. So look, I think there are a huge number of benefits, and firms need to think about those intangibles. Life is not about money. We will all forget the hard times that occur when it comes to money. We will never forget, I think, the great things that we get to do with people and for people, and the great things that get done for us. Sorry, that's a bit long-winded, Chris, but
thank you.
That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. And before I go back to some of our panelists to have viewpoints that they'd like to share with you, I want to us to look at a question that's been posed, very importantly, a three-part question. One of also from one of our participants. And the question is, could you please explain if there's a FIDIC member association in Iraq or in the Middle East? I'm guessing, Tony, you may answer that one, but I want to take the second part. Also, do we have to be working in consulting engineering companies to be able to volunteer? And I think I'm going to pick on Helen for that one. And Siobhan, can we only become volunteers in our own country's association? So we have three-part question from one individual. And Tony, if you could go first on the member association in Iraq and Middle East, please do proceed.
Yes, so that's a tough question for me sitting here. I don't believe we have a member association in Iraq, and I'm about 3 clicks away from being able to tell you. So the answer is no. We have one in Iran, we have Israel, and if I'm not wrong, there's one other, Jordan, in the Middle East. There may be others, and I think we've certainly had one in the past in UAE, but I'm not aware of any others at the moment.
I think if I may add to that, just by virtue of being involved in regional activities and the Member Associations Advisory Council, it is the intention in the short, medium to long term for FIDIC to consider a regional body in that region, pretty much as we have on the African continent, in the Asia Pacific region, in and the Americas. So that is a work in progress, and at some point we will probably have Nelson talk more on that, but he's unfortunately not available to do that today. Helen, do you have to be working in consulting engineering companies to be able to volunteer? I think that's a common question where people with different levels of expertise may want to volunteer, but they may not be part of a member firm. How do you deal with that as an association?
I'm going to answer that question, Chris, and then I'm also going to take this moment while I have the mic to talk to the previous point as well. My question would be, if you're a consultant and you want to volunteer and you have a local association, you should belong to your local association. Why not? So that would be your starting point. If you want to volunteer, work through your local member association. I understand on the call that there might not always be a local association for you to belong to start that volunteering journey through. So, you know, if you're working within a consulting, the consulting sector and interested in volunteering or lending your support, talk to the local association, see what they can do. Everyone might have a different approach, and or talk to FIDIC as well. For us at ACE, we see volunteering as that opportunity to profile our members, give them opportunity to influence and spread their impact. So members would always be our first point of call for volunteering, but we always want to talk with the wider sector as well. So it's not a clear answer, but if you are a consultant and you have a local membership association, join it is the key message here. The second point I wanted to make, it was actually quite aligned to what Anthony was saying about the employers, I guess the quandary that employers have around wanting to support their staff to volunteer, but also recognizing that's time away from billable hours. And I really wanted to emphasize the point that Tony made at the end around that difference between tangible value and intangible value as an employer. So, you know, the tangible value being that money, but also the intangible value that you have by allowing your staff those opportunities to volunteer. So, and that's been covered a lot around the panel today. You know, in a time of skills shortage, we need to be thinking about all we can as well in terms of employee retention And we see more and more that people in their roles want that opportunity to give back and contribute to their community. So supporting your staff to do that also elevates the employee value proposition that you're providing, and will help with that retention piece, as well as what they bring back to what they get personally and what they bring back to the organization, which is ultimately marketable to you, particularly at the national or at the global level if they're volunteering in those spaces. And I would also say, as an association, that in times of challenge or economic challenge, this is when it's more important than ever for your firm to double down on your long-term strategy, which includes investing in your people and upskilling your people, which includes through volunteer spaces as well. So that's what I wanted to say about that. I'm going to hand over to Siobhan for the third part of the question.
Siobhan, please go ahead.
Mute, there we go. So the question around, is there an opportunity to volunteer outside of your local MA? I mean, I think today, seeing people like Michelle and Prashant, it's quite common and also such an incredible opportunity to start volunteering with your local MA and then kind of increase your scope and increase your reach by volunteering with FIDIC. So I think the opportunities are there, and even today, I mean, I had done a LinkedIn post and I had met Helen at the conference last year, and so she reached out and said, hey, would you like to be part of this? So I think once you have established the connections, the opportunities become available. The other thing I'd like to speak to, that the previous question around value, and kind of dovetailing with what Helen had said around leaning into training your people. I mean, I spoke to the leadership development potential that happens with volunteering. And sometimes we pay a lot of money to train someone to get some leadership training, and this is a way where you're getting that incredible value and that incredible experience, and really all you're paying for is the time. So another thing to consider. All right, I see Anthony's got his hand up, so I'll pass it over.
Tony, please, if you want to add.
Yeah, one small benefit for young people, younger people than me, there's a lot of them, is the notion that you can find plenty of mentors in the FIDIC community and in your association who are not your boss. They're not inside your company, but they'll give you other perspectives. And the idea that you build a number of mentors around you is a great thing for your career. Just to build on what was mentioned earlier.
Thank you, Tony. I think if before you come in there, I think it's important in the question around, can we only become volunteers in our own country's association? We need to see the continuum of your role. Firstly, I think notwithstanding the fact that we have spoken about taking the long view, investing in the future, etc., one needs to focus on your contribution and your role in your company so that you earn your keep. There is a risk sometimes where with that passion, one gets too committed and then something has to give. And I think it's important for individuals to balance that. It's very easy to get yourself overly involved, much to the frustration of your employer, who, even though they support what you're doing, you need to find that balance. And, you know, it is not untrue. You can volunteer in your local country member association. You could volunteer at the next level in the regional member association, or you can volunteer at the FIDIC level. I think what's important is you've got to balance the time and your own obligations so that you don't compromise all of the elements, because besides, it does not help to over volunteer and you hardly pitch up for meetings, because I think also there is the risk that individuals like having these kind of things on their CV, but when you take score of how many meetings they've attended and what contribution you might have made, hardly any. So we need to be honest about making that contribution so we can claim to be a part of that intervention or that success. Any, please do go ahead.
Yes, I would like to ask to Prasan, what constraint do companies face in making members of staff available to participate in member association or in FIDIC committees? Because we have difficult to find the volunteers in the FIDIC committees. Thank you.
Thank you, Annie. I think it depends on a firm to firm. And I can say about my firm and what we've done over the last 15 or 20 years. As I said, I came on for the first time as a volunteer, both at the MA and at FIDIC 16 years ago. And I've had, 8 presidents at FIDIC. And when I now come to a conference, I have, attended conferences or worked under 7 presidents, past presidents who happen to attend the conferences, and the mentoring that comes with it, as Tony mentioned. So you have to invest in it for the long term. And you have to identify 2 or 3 people in the firm who are probably not going to, you can't really guarantee that they won't jump the bandwagon and shift firms, but you got to take that risk. And we've, done that gamble, and we've got 2 or 3 people with me who accompany me at most of the FIDIC events, who've attended at least 10 or 12 FIDIC conferences now. They're familiar with the people in the FIDIC family. As Tony said, you can walk up to CEOs of different firms, engage with them, learn about their firms, tell them about your firm, and then you get perspective. As a firm, I think the benefits are many, plenty. You cannot put a dollar value to it, but it's there in the long term. The kind of contracts that we won, the kind of new countries we ventured into post the interactions at FIDIC is very well documented. I mean, I can share with you that we met firms, and even we met some firms about 3 weeks ago at FIDIC Africa in Livingston, which we had not heard of, but they are present on the continent, work, and they're a fairly good size. And we are already talking of project engagement with them for prospective jobs. So I think you have to really invest to the profession. If you want to, have a say in the profession, you want to make a change, you need to put yourself out there, and you need to put yourself out there to be accountable, to be heard, and you need to invest in it, and then you get the returns.
Thank you, Prasan. Maybe I need to get the feedback from Siobhan as working with the companies. Do you have any problems when you join the volunteers in the member association or in the FIDIC?
I think I can speak to some of the challenges that future leaders sometimes face. I mean, we've talked about how it's easy to overextend yourself, especially if you're a serial volunteer. You put your hand up and you take on one thing, and you take on another thing, and you take on another thing, and then suddenly it's hard to actually get your work done. So I think, to Chris's point, and to really be honest about what it is that you are trying to achieve, and then to work with your supervisors, to work with your mentors. So if you do have a volunteer, especially a future leader volunteer, to make sure that you're guiding them through their volunteer journey, and you're having them consider what the value they're bringing both to their member association and to the company is, because I think it's through that awareness that you actually get the most benefit, and you can see someone that's now quite intentionally stepping through their career and bringing value in both spheres.
Thank you, Siobhan. Chris?
Thanks, Annie. I see there's a question here, and it came very early on, and it also comes through the poll. And I think this is an opportune moment, maybe, Helen, if you can answer the question of what do FIDIC member associations do and what is their role? Because the understanding of the local MA seems to be at the heart of it. Maybe there are communication issues, blockages, where the member association communications don't reach all the recipients in member companies. They could be directed at senior management only. And so the awareness at different levels may be limited. What would your view be on that from an MA perspective, Helen?
Thanks, Chris. How long have you got? I could say a lot about the roles
2
of
minutes.
members. Yeah, look, I mean, certainly speaking to what I know of member associations, and I know that, every country around the world is at a different stage of maturity and growth with their local member associations. So I'm speaking from a country that has had a consulting and engineering member association for 60 odd years now as a standalone association on its own. But as we are a firm-based membership association, we tend to engage with the senior levels of the association. Unlike, for example, an association that represents individual professionals like your engineering membership association or your surveying consulting association. So we do target the firm, certainly within the New Zealand sphere. In the leadership of the firm. And what that means is we're very focused on the issues that are relevant to running a consulting business. So those commercial challenges, those legal challenges, the challenges of dealing as a business with climate change, with the future of work, with AI, those sorts of things are the issues that come through, and then roll up to FIDIC at a global level. So I think it was mentioned in the beginning, either by Tony or Louis or Chris, that FIDIC has about almost 100 member associations within its membership. So FIDIC at that global level, with more than around 100 associations across the world that are each representing the consulting industry in their country. And for us in New Zealand, as a representative, what that means is that we are the champion for consultants. So we describe ourselves as the consultants champion. We are about elevating the voice of our consultants and making sure that everybody knows the amazing work that you do, that we're at the forefront of decision making at government. So we have those relationships with client organisations, with ministers, and we can make sure that there's a really strong presence in discussions at a policy level about what those policies mean for the business of consulting. We're also at ACE New Zealand, the second pillar of our strategy is about preparedness, so preparing our members for the challenges of today or tomorrow. So your associations will all do similar things. It's about providing the education and the tools and the resources so that you can be the best you can be and overcome all sorts of challenges. And then for us, there's also a professionalism element. So how can you be a great consultant, and how can we support you to be that? There's sitting within that, there's connections, and there's leadership, and there's the concept of enablement. So for those of you who have membership associations within your country, they'll all be doing a variation of those types of things on your behalf to make your work and your work environment and your operational environment stronger and more effective for your consulting business. And then we look up to FIDIC as we cast our eyes out at the global level. How do we work together at a global level to make all of those things visible and impactful? Does that answer it, Chris?
Yes, thank you. And I think from a developmental perspective, Siobhan, maybe you can offer some insights here on, is it a good idea to bypass your local member association, hardly volunteer there, and then apply for to participate in a FIDIC committee? Would we not argue that one should crawl before you run, if you were to use that analogy? What would your perspective be? I think, one does not want to limit volunteerism, but is there not the need for an understanding of what the role of the local member association is and how they're integral to the sustainability of FIDIC.
Yeah, I think it's very important to volunteer locally first. I mean, there's a question of building awareness and building understanding of how all of the pieces fit together. But I spoke earlier to understanding kind of your intentions and understanding the value that you can bring. So I think being aware of yourself as an individual and what it is you're hoping to impact. There might be some people where they feel that it's critical that the work that they can do needs to happen at one level versus another. I mean, and I think to your point, you do need to get that awareness. But I think once you know, okay, yes, this is the change that I want to see, and I can make that change by volunteering with FIDIC. I think once you've sort of put the work in, there's nothing to say that you cannot sort of make some steps or make some moves to volunteer at that higher level sooner. But I think it needs to be done with intentionality. I think there's also the concern of someone who's using these, using volunteerism as a way to build their resume. I think it's really important to be honest with yourself that you're here because you want to actually make a difference. This isn't about just adding extra titles and extra words on your resume. This is about actually building and being part of a community. I think Helena talked about, people who sit on committees, who show up at meetings but don't do anything. That really drains from everyone else who's volunteering. So I think that is one thing that as a leader on a committee, I'm always very aware of. And so when I'm seeing that someone is showing up but not necessarily doing a lot, that's when I start to go and have those conversations that are more value-based. Say, what is it that you're hoping to get out of this volunteer opportunity? And, there is a resume building component. I think that is important, but trying to also appeal to people's deeper value-based reasons for being there is very important too. So I think to kind of wrap it up, Chris, it's understand why you're there and then figure out where you can actually provide that best value, but to do it in a way that is measured and to do it in a way that provides value at all levels and builds understanding at all levels so that you kind of get a well-rounded experience through the volunteerism.
Thank you, Shaban. And I think to wrap on the responses to those questions, I'm going to take a response from Prashant and then Tony rather quickly before we start getting to the final part of our program.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I agree with Shaban. I think there is a certain set of people that you come across who are just volunteering for resume building, and that is something that we need to be wary of. But I think more importantly, as I said, earlier, that volunteers are the fuel for FIDIC. And if you're looking at the good quality fuel, you need to look at good quality engineers. And I think that is why a kind of a mechanism where the volunteers are nominated by the MA, and then there's a process of selection that is undertaken at FIDIC, brings you the right set of people that you need and want on your committee. I'm not a advocate of saying that one should directly look at coming onto a FIDIC committee, because we don't know what we're getting then in terms of the quality of the person who's volunteering. So I think it is important that the volunteer is rooted through the MA and is there for the purpose of giving back to the society, working for the profession, working for the industry, and not just resume building. So.
Tony, final contribution on this issue, please.
Yeah, so a couple of small comments. I think in general what's been said is absolutely right, but it's a very good thing to volunteer locally. But the reality, we've got one little sort of situation which is a little bit different to that, where we get a lot of experts in a country who will not cooperate for competitive reasons, but will happily contribute at a global level. So we do have situations where FIDIC is looking for world-class expertise, and we do go to the member associations and we do ask them to nominate people, but quite often they have not volunteered locally simply because they don't want to expose themselves to competitive pressure in their local market. but they're more than happy to contribute to, guidance documents and other things that FIDIC might get involved in. Small point, but important.
Thanks, Tony. And I think that is an invaluable, sobering part of what needs to be factored into our thinking as part of the entire ecosystem. Without further ado, we are now, I'm going to close on the questions, and I would like us to pop over to the second poll, and if we can do a quick lightning poll. We still have a good few minutes that we can use. And the question here, colleagues, is what is your level of knowledge and involvement in FIDIC? You have 3 options and 3 seconds to go. You get to choose one. And while we wait for the poll to wrap, I would like to believe that, our attendance is really good, that as participants, you've at least gotten the insights. These are obviously topics that we could speak on for a lot longer, but let me just go to the results on our poll. And so the level of knowledge and involvement in FIDIC is a complete converse to the earlier one, is at 41%. There's a high understanding of FIDIC and what it does, and individuals' involvement, and a medium at 38%. That's not too far from 41%. So somewhere between high and medium. There's an awareness at the medium level. I'm aware of FIDIC's work, but not yet involved. And then only 21% have a low level of knowledge on FIDIC and would like to know more. So I think in all of these, we see opportunity, both to capitalize on those who understand more and to grow future volunteers into the committees as participants in the various committees, and convert the level of knowledge on FIDIC into what may be an overwhelmingly high number. But obviously this is time bound, and as the generations of engineers come through the ranks of consulting engineering practitioners, as you grow your career, you may start at the low and eventually at your level of expertise be sitting at a high level, and indeed be actively engaged in all of the activities of FIDIC, which I would like to remind all of us is way more than just about FIDIC contracts. I think that is just one of the benefits. And I think to wrap and share with you some of the broader benefits and initiatives that FIDIC is busy with at this point in time in respect of credentialing, and all the other really good practices that we need to adopt in our respective countries. I'm going to hand over to Tony. But before I do that, would you like to make a last remark before we hand over to Tony to close this session?
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, I would like to invite the volunteers from the firms who can remark your company, and this is good for marketing, and also to improve leadership for your staff, and this is good for your company in the future. So please, we hope that after the webinar, there's a lot of the volunteers register to FIDIC and also to member association, and hopefully that we will get a good quality of the volunteers. Thank you.
Thank you, Eni. And Tony, closing remarks from you, please.
Yeah, look, very, very quickly, I think we've heard a lot about the personal benefits to your career and in terms of your the exercise, if you like, of your personal responsibility as a consulting engineer or built environment professional. We've heard a lot about that. I think FIDIC, your own association, offer you tremendous opportunities for mentoring, to develop your own self-awareness. We've already heard about it, your own leadership style, and to really engage with the industry nationally in your country, but also internationally. Building a network of international colleagues I have found to be a most satisfying and wonderful thing over 40 years in the industry. So certainly something I recommend and support, and I do think it's extremely good for you. FIDIC has many, many services it offers. It has many guidance documents. It has obviously the contracts. There is a huge amount of rich material in the FIDIC body of knowledge, and getting the benefit of that for you, for your company, for your member association is also something you should be thinking about and contemplating. There are many leads to those things on our website, and you can always contact the Secretariat if you need further help on that. Coming up, we've got a couple of events which I'll just make quick mention of. And on the 11th of July, we have another Golden Principles of Business Practice webinar, which is organised by our Business Practice Leadership Committee. I think that will be a very interesting one. We then move on to the State of the World report, which is navigating the digital journey to reducing carbon. That's a very serious obligation on behalf of the industry that we're taking on, and there's been a lot of work done over the last 12 months on that subject. Then off to 28th, 29th of November in London for the official FIDIC International Contract Users Conference and Awards. Those of you who are interested in contracts, I certainly recommend you try and get along to that. And of course, our premier event is the Singapore conference from the 10th to the 12th of September 2023. It's our global infrastructure conference. It should be a great event. There are quite a number of reports that are going to be shared at that conference addressing sustainability, the use of nature-based solutions in infrastructure. A lot of questions around carbon balance sheets and how we are going to, as an industry, address measuring carbon into the atmosphere, and how we address that to make our projects, if you like, our infrastructure much more sustainable, resilient and adaptable. So I hope that you'll come and join us at that event. Promises to be very successful. With that, I'll say good night from me. I hope wherever you are, you have a great day going forward. And thank you very much for your attendance. Much appreciated. Bye-bye.